Well, ladies and gentlemen, what a great start to the morning. We're going to continue now. We've got Alexandra from the University of Vienna. So could you tell us a little bit about whereabouts you are in your career? Are you just starting PhD?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool. So that's the start of some work that's going to take you, how long? Is that 3 or 4 years? Or
3, 4 years, yeah, and then you have...
That's a terrible question. I don't mean to make you nervous or thinking about the end just yet. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about your work. So you work on speciation. Can you tell us a little bit about speciation and maybe how long that idea has been around for?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look into nature, you can see there is so many different forms of every different possible organism. And the most are mammals, but they are so small compared to all the rest. If you just look at insects, it's amazing how many of them there are, millions and millions. And so, if you just look into the past, the first guy who just really get interested in this idea of speciation, really kind of understood what's going on, was Darwin, with his expedition on the Beagle in the 18th century. And so, in his book, The Origin of Species, he already start to understand how it works. It is the only figure in the book, if you look at it, it's a tree of life with branch of different species evolving and splitting and so on, and also going extinct. And what we are really interesting now is to understand how this process can happen. How can you have a first species and how can it split over time and make 2 new species? So that's really what we're interested in.
So that's a really sort of ingrained, really important question in the whole of biology, isn't it? You know, how does speciation occur? From where do new species arise? So and there's a big history of people looking at that question.
Yeah. It has been quite well since Darwin started with this book and so on. People have been really interested in these questions, and one of the kind of oldest explanation was you just have your species you are interested in it. They just occur on 2 different parts of the globe. For example, if you have one group in America and the other one in Europe, then you just wait for a really long time. And just because there will be selections, which means that a couple of individuals may have some advantage compared to the other, so they will kind of spread into the nature, and because Europe and America are different, it will be different kind of modifications that will be favored. And also per pure random luck. You also have some modifications that will happen, and if you wait for a long time, which means millions of years, then you will have 2 different groups of individuals, and you will obtain species. But the problem with this hypothesis is that imagining that these 2 groups are completely separate for millions of years is kind of unrealistic. And more now we are interested in trying to understand how this can also happen. But if you have from time to time a couple of guys that go from Europe to America and so on, in this example.
So I think we touched this morning already on the concept of species. Do you have a certain concept of species that you use? Is there actually a defined definition of what exactly a species is? Because this is a word that we're banding around a lot. I don't know whether we do actually know what a species is.
Well, no, it's really kind of complex. No one really agree on what exactly a species is. You can have kind of different definitions. One of the kind of widespread one is that a group of individuals that can reproduce and produce fertile offsprings, but it does not all really nicely, because if you just took the Darwin finches that are kind of famous, they can all cross, but we still consider them different species, because if you look at the gene inside and the DNA, they are quite distinct, so we still call them different species. So it's kind of a not really clear definitions. No one agree on it. It's still needs some consensus on it.
So if you're studying species and speciation, I think a lot of people, if you told people that you did that at a party, they'd think, oh, you know, this guy has a beard, he spends a lot of time in the forest, actually.
Not at all, in fact.
Being a field biologist. So that isn't the sort of work you do?
No, not at all. Because, well, there's 2 ways you can study this kind of stuff. You can either go in the forest, of course, and pick up some cool stuff, or you can just try to do model things. And the nice thing with models, you can start with let's imagine. So you just can simplify a lot, because if you go into the forest, you have plenty of tree, you have different species of tree, you also have plenty of stuff, you also have humans, that's kind of big stuff with everything, and you cannot really understand what's going on. Whereas you just do a model, you can really simplify it to the basics you really want to understand. So let's say I want to understand how my species get split. I would just want selection to have it, so I just put a parameter for selection, and I control it. And then you can put migration and so on. And same things for even random stuff. Now with computer, it's super easy to do random stuff. So with this kind of model, it's much more easy to really focus on one important criteria and understand how it can impact the speciation process. But of course, as some British mathematician says, all models are wrong. but some are useful. So it's not a proper answer. You cannot give a full answer about this, but it helps you a lot to understand what's going on.
Yeah. So that's you're taking something as astonishingly complex as the natural world, and you're piece by piece taking certain things out or
exactly.
seeing how different variables are affecting it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's all done in silico, just in a computer.
Yeah, or just handwriting with equations.
Or writing with equations, yeah. So in terms of your work, I think, where do you see the use of this being? Because obviously it's inherently interesting, but do you see it as actually being very useful as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, understanding the speciation process is kind of important. Now we have lots of conservation programs for species that are in danger, but what we need to know also is that extinction is a natural process. So therefore, we really need to understand how it works, how species forms, and also how they extinct to have a proper extinct, if you want to save species, and really save the process itself, and not just a couple of nice species, like tiger or so on. You really need to understand what's going on. And in addition, since a couple of last century, we have just much increased the number of travelers we have around the world because of human activities. And therefore now we are mixing a lot of species that has been quite apart for a long time. And because some of them are quite close, they now can kind of cross with each other and mix the gene pools and so on, and we have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, if you just go in Great Britain, you can see now all the squirrels in London are grey. That's not a proper squirrel. It should be red. Same thing for bluebirds. Now you have the Spanish bluebirds that kind of invade and mix with the British one. So that's why we really need to understand what's going on fundamentally to be able to develop proper program to save these species.
Wow. And in terms of, I suppose, people now travelling a lot more, it's so much easier for people to do that. Do you think we're going to see more of these events happening?
Well, it's kind of tricky because a lot of them are already going on. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, it sounds like really, really important, cool stuff. And Alexandra, you're wonderful. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning about your work.
Thanks so much.